have you all introduced yourselves to each other? Okay.
And we've realized that we're all part of each other's organizations. So.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, look, first of all, just thank you for being here this morning on a busy Monday. And good morning. How are you? Good, good. I thought what I'd do, and why don't you introduce yourself as you're sitting down to the group? So. Great, thank you, Michael. So, one of the things I always just want to do is touch base with veterans in New Hampshire. One, to hear how things are going generally, to hear how, in particular, the implementation of new laws are going. So the PACT Act comes to mind, and we've got some developments there. Some new presumptive conditions have been approved, which is important and kind of an ongoing part of the process. I also like to update people on what's going on, so we can talk a little bit about the passage of the Elizabeth Dole Act, which, as you know, has some important provisions that will strengthen home caregiving for veterans and strengthen supports for their caregivers. I really wanted to be able to update you all on that, but also hear about how things are going. So we could proceed just around the table informally, or each of you can take a turn to tell me your thoughts or ask me a question, just kind of however you want to do this.
I guess so.
Yeah.
We had heard that they were going to start cutting benefits. A guy in a nursing home got a letter saying they were going to cut his percentage from 100% down to 75%.
Within the nursing home.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, we will look at that. Justin should follow up with the individuals. So we have been fighting really hard to preserve benefits, as you know, with the expansion of the PACT Act.
Yep.
There was a cash flow problem at the end of the summer, which we attended to in September legislatively and gave the VA more money, while we also said you guys got to be better projecting what your actual costs are going to be. The problem, from my perspective, was kind of a healthy problem in the sense that a lot of people signed up for PACT Act and qualified for PACT Act, and that's really where the debit came from. But as far as I know, we are not cutting benefits. One of the things the Elizabeth Dole Act did was say that if you want home care, the VA right now, before the Elizabeth Dole Act passed, could only support or give 65% of what they were paying for a nursing home towards home care. Now we're going to be able to do 100% of the cost of nursing home care towards the home care too. So another way to strengthen that choice for veterans.
Yeah.
And also, I hope, strengthen the pay scale for home care workers, which is a real issue in terms of recruitment.
Yeah.
But, if anybody wants to follow up personally with our constituent service offices on particular letters they're getting, they should do that, because sometimes the letters are very bureaucratic and very confusing, right? Yeah.
How do you think the VA is going to handle the care, hiring all those people?
For the home care?
Yes.
So there's, the Dole Act says that we're going to invest in pilot programs to do more recruitment within the VA for home care, but also it allows the VA to do contracts with private home care giving companies, so that we're not just saying they have to be home care workers who work for the VA directly. As somebody who has a family member who relies on home care, I will tell you there's been an overall shortage of home care workers, although it has gotten, I'd say the last 6 months for us has been better. More options, more people in the field, it seems. But that's one of the areas that we're really focusing on, is how can the VA recruit and retain home care workers. More generally, I think we need to have more investment in home care in our whole healthcare system. It's obviously most people would rather manage their chronic illness or disability at home. And it can be less expensive, but it has to be integrated. And we need to let people who want to do home care as a profession be treated as professionals, right? So have a career, earn enough to support a family, right? And that's, I still struggle with, we had to fight really hard in our personal situation to go from $15 an hour to $20 an hour. And I said, who's working for $15 an hour right now, right?
The guy at McDonald's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is crazy. So we got some work to do there.
I think even nationwide, our population is aging. New Hampshire is the second oldest population in the state, or in the country.
Yep.
And to not just for veterans, but to increase those programs. And I don't know if the VA through the Elizabeth Dole Act is going to be growing, growing the population through public-private partnerships, working with maybe community colleges to get the folks trained. But that's difficult with the retention because people get trained and they're like, oh, I'm going over to this private or place and I'm going to get more money.
Well, and so one of the options there is for the VA to go to the private contractor and contract with them so that we don't, again, have to have it just be VA direct employees. But the other thing I think we need to do is recognize that when we invest in home care, it has real benefits in terms of health, in terms of other kinds of cost savings. In theory, less trips to the emergency room, more family support too, and I think that it should be a win-win. But you're right, we're aging and we need to have a plan in place to recruit and again make these jobs professional jobs where people can build a career and support a family.
I did like in the verbiage of the bill that there's going to be a directive to have one central website.
Yeah.
Because I run into a lot of older veterans and maybe they have a smartphone that their teenage granddaughter set up for them, but they don't have computers and they get lost and they give up.
Yeah.
So we need a way to communicate to them that these benefits are available.
Right. And we need to be able to make sure that if they need to talk to somebody on the phone,
They can
they
actually
can actually talk to a human.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, we're working on another bill I've just put in, so it's not passed yet, is one that would give veterans access to all the specialty service schedules all in one place. So if you wanted to go in one day and get all your appointments done, you could have visibility into all of them. And that actually comes from a staff member who was trying to set up his own appointments, and he had to keep hanging up the phone and calling another, it just was, this is crazy. So, but in general, we need to make sure there's a single website. We have a bill that just passed that's going to require every agency in the federal government to have essentially somebody in charge of consumer service, and because I think it should be as easy to get services or to get a response from somebody as it is for most retailers. Not all retailers are great, but most businesses have a financial interest in making sure they have a good relationship with you and that it's pretty easy, and we want that to be true in the government.
What do you think with the new regime coming in? What budget? Is there any spell about it that we should be concerned with?
So I think, as is true generally, we are going to need to stay vigilant. The reason we got the PACT Act done, the reason the Elizabeth Dole Act was passed is because of all of you and your colleagues and fellow veterans around the country. People didn't give up till we got it done, and they kept raising the issue in Washington and locally. We're going to need to continue to do that. I've met with the nominee for Secretary of the VA, Mr. Collins. We had a really good conversation. He is a veteran himself. He's a former military chaplain, and he was a member of Congress, so he understands how the budget system works. And he pledged to me that he is absolutely committed to making sure that veterans get the services they need. I raised a number of issues about rural veterans in particular. He's from Georgia, which has a large rural veteran population too. So I feel good about him. I got to see how his full hearing goes, right? That's always the caveat. But assuming there aren't any other barriers, I think he will, in good faith, try to protect veterans and protect the budget. As you also are reading, the overall message from many of the people who are involved in setting up this administration is that they're planning to do very big spending cuts. And I'm on bills that actually would provide what I think are pretty intelligent cuts in federal spending, because we could be a lot smarter in some. We have a lot of duplicate programs, but the VA ain't one of them. And so we need to make sure we're protecting what's important. And just as was true in the first Trump administration, when they tried to do really big cuts in certain areas, we were able to push back on that, and we were able to protect those areas. So it's going to take a lot of advocacy, and that's one of the reasons it's so important for me to be able to just talk with all of you, because when people tell me their individual situations or what they use their benefits for, that really helps me convey to other members of Congress that it takes it out of the ideological fight, which is some of what happens here. People who, quote, believe in government, people who don't, people who think the government's too big, people who want it all to be state-run. And I think when we're able to say, no, this is why the federal government does this, and veterans is a perfect example, I think we are usually successful when we can tell the story well, and there's an important story to tell, and bipartisan support for veterans, in my view, has never been stronger. I mean, when I talk to other members, all the bills we've passed in the last couple of years have been bipartisan ones. I just don't have a partisan debate with any of my colleagues about the need to support veterans.
Now, some of the other things are mental health and homelessness.
Yeah.
Which I was glad to see that in New Hampshire, veteran homelessness is going down. Overall, it's going up, but
Yeah.
for veterans, it's going down.
Yeah.
The new Veterans Center in Franklin, that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
And then we have the Suicide Prevention Coalitions. We're up to 9 around the state now.
Wow.
So those are still, there's some that are in their infancy, and
Yeah.
there's some that are been around for a few
Yeah.
years, but
Yeah.
that's a grassroots way.
Yeah. And I think, it's the mixture of grassroots and then critical investment at the right time, and
we have-
investment in professionals, right? So one of the things that you all have helped me with on things like the Solid Start Act, but also the Buddy Check program, is just understanding Solid Start is where the VA is going to reach out in a very organized way to make sure people know what's available. But the Buddy Check is about peer-to-peer. And what veterans, all of you have told me throughout my time in public office, is nobody understands another veteran like a veteran. And that it's, especially if you're struggling with some mental health issues. So on the homelessness and mental health front, I think we've made some progress. We've got more to go, right? I think increasingly people are more comfortable about talking about their mental health challenges. I don't know what you all think. Obviously, we've heard of some high-profile cases in the last couple of weeks where a veteran had a mental health issue and hadn't reached out about it, or hadn't reached out enough to get the kind of help he needed. But we also need to continue to invest in mental health care. And one of the battles is going to be, I don't think as much within the VA, but generally speaking, the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion requires mental health and addiction treatment to be covered. And that's a critical lifeline for people, because Medicaid expansion says that single individuals under certain income limits, or who aren't employed because they've got mental health or other issues, can get health care and get that care covered. And then we also have to just increase scholarships and subsidies for tuition for people who go into mental health and addiction treatment. The other good piece of news in the last year is our overdose deaths nationally have gone down for the first time in a long time, and in Hampshire, again, I'm nervous because I don't I'm like, that doesn't mean we're still out of the woods. It just means for the first time since fentanyl hit, we're seeing a little the other direction, right? And that's just a sign that maybe the presence of our support services, the investments we made in the Support Act are bearing fruit. So now we just got to keep it up. And homelessness, we just, among other things, we need a bigger supply of housing. So, I was pleased. I was at Governor Ayotte's inauguration on Thursday, and I was pleased to see her focusing on that too.
So like when you're mentioning like the mental health awareness and stuff for like the veterans, sometimes it's hard for, even if they're still active duty with TRICARE, of getting like actual services that they need, and even their dependents that are like living with it,
Yeah, so I know the TRICARE issue is important, I think, to you and to, it should be to everybody. I'm going to keep pushing to see what we can do about the 26, the keeping people on their parents' TRICARE till age 26, just the way they could be under the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, it seems like there's like a comma somewhere or
a
conjunction that's missing somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's expensive.
And it's expensive.
Well, I'm a retiree. I had both my children as TRICARE young adult.
Yeah.
Prime is like $600 a month.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
when you're paying for college, and that's what I had. I'm trying to pay for my kids' insurance and put them through school.
Yeah. No, and that's we changed that for private insurance in the state even before the Affordable Care Act. I still remember the testimony of a really brave young woman who was in college. She got cancer, and in order to stay insured, she had to stay a student full time. And it was like stage 3 or 4 colon cancer or something like that. I mean, it was really tough, and she had to try to keep her full course load so she could keep her health insurance. So that was our big impetus to changing it at the state level, and then the ACA. And it's one thing to say technically they can stay on, but if you've got to pay $600, it's crazy.
They got to be full time.
Or they,
And there's no gap year. There's no taking a couple of years to go work a regular job to see how that feels. Or, there's just no opportunities for that.
Yeah.
So that's.
So Justin here, and then Joe, who's my policy guy on veteran stuff in DC. They have both. We're trying to figure out where and how to try to get that changed. But it's a really important issue. Do you know if it was an administrative error in the TRICARE piece, adults up to 26, or is it just that they didn't want to spend the money?
I'm not sure if it was an administrative error. I know that Senator Kelly has the
Yeah, okay, he's got the bill. Okay, yeah, and I think I'm on that, but I will talk to him.
I think you take a look at it and look at it as a form of discrimination. Because you're in the military.
Yeah, you're not getting the
Doesn't
same
make
thing
sense.
as, it
It's
doesn't
like
make sense.
everybody else.
Yeah, we should.
And like another thing too, like for like TRICARE in general, is if you have children that are incapacitated, can't take care of themselves.
Yeah.
The proof thing.
Okay. I would love to learn more about that, because one of the things we're working on, which isn't exactly the same, but we're trying to, for kids with disabilities, when they go to college, they have to like start the whole process of proving they're disabled and that they need accommodations all over again. When if you've been through a regular school district in New Hampshire, you've already done all of that. So we want to. I've got a bill that says the colleges should be able to accept what the school system had, and that's all they should be able to require. And so this is a similar issue. Once you prove you've got a disability, it should be able to stick. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to work with you on that. Yeah.
I wrote it down. Send Justin
Email. That's great. What else is going on?
go back to like the caregivers, because
Yeah.
one of the last times I saw you was on the island out there in the
Yeah,
middle of the
yeah,
lake.
that's
That was a
right.
retreat for caregivers.
Caregivers, right.
So talking with them, it sounds like, more support for them is a good thing, because they
Yeah.
tend to get isolated.
Yeah. So there are some provisions in the Elizabeth Dole Act. One that mean that we're going to increase our investment in home caregiving, make it more possible for people, try to recruit more caregivers. The other piece is to make sure that we're transparent about who qualifies for the more expensive caregiving program. The family members who are caregivers. There have been changes in some cases to eligibility for that, and it's been very opaque as to why some people get included or qualified as an eligible caregiver and some people don't. So we've pushed them. And Justin, is it now in the law, or did they just agree to be more transparent in terms of the caregiving determinations?
If you're denied, then they will explain to you why you're not denied,
Right.
and they'll also provide you with like
The criteria.
consultation, like a
Yeah.
coordinator to help you apply.
Yeah, and then if you give, and so for family caregivers who don't qualify as eligible, there's now going to be a caregiver coordinator to help find other services for that veteran in the caregiving community. There's also an improvement in and more support for generally speaking mental health support for caregivers, because it is
Good.
really isolating.
It is.
And
Stressful, too.
it's it's stressful, it's isolating, and it's 24/7 even when you're training a new caregiver or somebody else is with I mean, I thought the retreat was so good, and it was so fun for me to be able to be there and just see that these caregivers could take a deep breath in a beautiful place
And relax for a
and
bit.
relax
yeah.
for a bit, which is really one of the hardest things when you're a family caregiver in particular. So there's more and more recognition, I do think, of the role of family caregivers. I think one of the things, to Mike's point, we're going to have to be vigilant about is that's the type of program that can slip away if budgets are tight, because people, whenever the word coordination is involved in a program, people kind of say, well, you don't really need a separate person to coordinate things. And the fact is, it doesn't happen if somebody doesn't have the time to do it. And people don't have the time to do it if they're expected to do a bunch of other more urgent things first, right? So, we will keep our eye on that. But again, when people tell their stories, I think a lot of Americans don't understand the level of family caregiving and support that loved ones provide for veterans, along with other people, but for veterans in particular.
Yeah.
And what a service it is, and the fact that at some point that family member isn't going to be there, and the country needs to have a system in place that will provide for that veteran.
Yeah.
Well, also from a mental health standpoint, a mental health provider sees a person maybe once a week.
Yeah.
That person that's living with them actually sees them 24/7.
Yeah.
And gets a much different picture than maybe what that person is portraying in that meeting.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different level of care that live-in caregiver is able to give.
Yeah.
And also, the support needed.
Yeah.
You think about the support that a mental health professional, they also see mental health professionals for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's wonderful that was added in that.
Yeah, no, and it's very insightful, because we can all clean up well for an hour a week.
Right.
And I mean clean up in the full holistic way, right? But day to day we see each other, and
Yeah, with the Dole Act, they cleaned up the language regarding, a surviving spouse. So I'm a military widow, veteran, all brat, you name it. So my partner now, that I can say that I have one,
Yeah.
because no one's going to come after me because the language has been changed. He is also a veteran and struggles with various mental health challenges, but seeing it from both sides, knowing what he tells the shrink, if you will, and what his life is actually like,
yeah,
and some of the things that they've diagnosed him with, and I'm like, no,
yeah,
I don't see that, because I'm with you all the time, that they're getting a snapshot that's not full picture.
Yeah.
But it is challenging, so I think it's great that there's now support for that.
There's more, but it's still,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's very important because like my spouse can run a really good act for his mental health person, right? But I live with him every day and I see him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, your spouse is still
It's
got
serving.
reasons
Yeah.
to be protective of what he shares.
Yes, because he's afraid that they'd use it against him and put him up.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that's another story altogether.
So I need to keep it quiet till the end.
And then some of that lingers after
Which
you
is-
get out.
Yeah.
Like those behaviors, that pattern of like not telling the doctor anything. And we were in aviation, so I've never been sick a day in my life, doc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that kind of carries over sometimes as well. Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to go see a doctor. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
It's just this
So,
stigma that's
yeah.
kind of there.
But it's great that the provisions for that caregiver are in there.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
they can
think,
be a part of that
I
plan.
mean, and maybe we need to think through how to tell those stories. And I mean, this is an ongoing process. In the veterans community is distinct in its own way, and my own observation and understanding, being the daughter of a veteran, he was World War II, so a long time ago, but my dad saw himself as the person who protected everybody else, so that was that. And he didn't need help from anybody else about healthcare or life generally. But I also think just generally in our society, we are doing better, but we still treat mental health as something we shouldn't talk about, can't talk about. And that's partly depending on the job. It might be a military job, it might be a civilian job. There have been long-term prohibitions against letting people do certain kinds of work if they've ever had any kind of mental health treatment, and that we got to figure that out. Same thing with substance use disorder, because we have a lot of people now who've been treated for substance use disorder, and we got to figure out a way to make sure they're safe on the job, but also make sure that
They're not discriminated
they're
against
not.
because of
I mean, because there are ways of treating all of these things, and we got to get much more comfortable as a society talking about it. And
One thing they did in the military when I was in, I don't know if it's a program, I think it's still around, but it was MFLAC, Military Family Life Coordinator, and they did 6-week rotations at a base, and they were completely confidential. It didn't go into your medical records. So if you were a military member, and it was an Air Force base, so a lot of people would lose their ability to fly for up to a year or longer while they clawed back out of that. If they actually went to see somebody about their mental health, they could go see this person for any reason, and then they swapped out every 6 weeks. So there wasn't a continuing relationship, which was both good. It had its benefits, probably had its downsides as well, but it was a way for somebody to go get some like short-term help without carrying a stigma that interfered with their career if it didn't need to.
Right. Almost like an ombudsman who keeps things confidential but could counsel you if they thought maybe you should take a step back.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
I retired 15 years ago, but I remember folks that actually went to private, they stayed out of the military treatment facility and went to private mental health care provider because they didn't want anything in their records whatsoever.
Yeah.
But, we're still fighting that stigma, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And some things are short term. So, for example, when my husband died, was I sad? Hell yeah, I was. So, but did I need a diagnosis of depression for forever? No.
Right.
And so, if I went to go see somebody, that needed to be a diagnosis that I needed to carry with me, and that needed to prevent me from doing some kind of a job like being a pilot or something.
Yeah.
So that
Kind of like the first aid concept, which is sometimes, sometimes we just need a friend and a shoulder and a chance to know somebody's on our side and that we're going through something that grieving is a natural thing.
Normal thing. Yeah.
Natural and normal. So are a lot of mental health, that's the thing. We get colds, we get flus,
Yes.
we get cyclical depressions and other things too, depending on who we are what our situation is. So.
Kind of a caveat to the mental health conversation, but totally different.
Yeah.
It just came into my
Yeah.
mind that I read an article not too long ago about recruiting.
Yeah.
So kids that may have, all right, I was on, not me, but I was
Yeah.
on Ritalin when I was in elementary school
Yes.
or
Yep.
middle school or whatever,
Yes.
you know, as a hyperactive kid.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to enter the armed forces, but because I have this on my record, I'm exempt. And
Yeah.
you probably already know we can only recruit 23% of the kids from 18 to 24, and then of those that even have an inkling that want to go in the
Yeah.
military, it's much lower than that.
Yeah.
But if there's other barriers we could break down for recruitment.
That's a really good point because, anecdotally, I've heard a lot. I've had friends who are now in the Army, but they had childhood asthma, and overcoming, proving that that's no longer something that would keep them from being effective in the Army. It took a long time and a lot of paperwork and a lot of stubbornness. I mean, because the first response is, I guess I'm not going to go into the military then, and if it were not for her very persistent grandmother, this young man would have thought it. She was very, very persistent and figured it out. But it's a really good point because this is true now with modern medicine. There are a lot of conditions that once upon a time were too risky, too life-threatening, or just too hard to manage in a military setting, and now we know a lot more about them, and there's a lot more that we can do. So.
Somebody explained it to me like PTSD is kind of like diabetes.
Yeah.
You have it, but it's treatable.
Yeah.
And as long as you stick with the treatment, you're fine.
Yeah. And that's I think that's true for a lot of mental illness, and it's a mixture of medications now, therapies, understanding of what the illness is, and it's going to be, like all of us, treatment is unique to our particular condition. But again, it's making sure that the medications are covered and accessible, that the treatment is covered and accessible. We know just for our young people, if they can get supports and treatment in school rather than having to have mom or dad take time off from work and drive them to an appointment after school, it can make a huge difference. I just visited an elementary school Friday where they've got a guidance counselor who she has some regular groups, but kids know they can just go, they can ask for a pass to go chill out in her room. Some of it is seeing her, some of it is just taking 5 minutes to sit on a beanbag and not have to do anything and hold a stuffed animal. But the fact that that's accessible to kids in their school day as opposed to something separate has real tangible advantages. And similarly, if you could go to your primary care doc's office and there would be a warm handoff to a mental health counselor who may need to see you only once or twice just to say, why don't you try this strategy or that strategy. You might need to see you more often, but we really need to make this kind of integrated care, and the VA, we need to do that for the VA as well as regular civilian health care too.
We have to keep all the different options because you always make that pitch to veterans. It's like, oh, I saw a shrink one time and I didn't like it. It's like, have you tried peer-to-peer counseling? Have you tried the group stuff? Have you tried ePoint there?
Yeah.
You got to keep all those options because it's
That's right.
something different for
For
everybody.
everybody, that's right. And I think, the equine therapy piece has been really interesting to observe too. And you're right, different options, different people, makes a big difference.
Beekeeping therapy.
It's
Yeah.
big now.
It's big.
I know lots of beekeepers now.
Really?
Yes, veteran
wow.
beekeepers.
Oh, cool. Just something about the process and the routine.
Because you have to be calm. Bees
Yeah.
don't like excitable
No.
people. So if you're calm and measured,
well, and
good
horses,
therapy. Same thing horses
same basic
know.
theory of
Yeah, they have
horses.
that equine training and stuff. So the Manchester VA, they have a place in Goffstown
Yep.
that they do that
Yeah.
at, and my brother goes to the White River construction one, and he has his place, and he actually volunteers now and
Yeah.
trains people in Newport. So it's like I never knew about it. He took me one day when he was volunteering, and I was like, "This is the coolest thing ever! I got to hug a horse today.
Yeah.
I never got that close to a horse ever.
Yeah.
No?
No.
And you have to be calm.
Yeah. No, horses will let you know the minute you take your mind off of connecting with them. As somebody who's been thrown from her share of horses over the years, the minute you start thinking about all the other stressors in your day, the horse knows it and you're off. You know, or and they're also very kind and very intuitive. So I mean, it's a really interesting thing. So keeping a wide variety and modes of treatment and activities. Because the other thing is you don't have to tell people, you don't have to say, we need you to say that you have some sort of mental illness or disability or PTSD. If an option will help you, you know, if you like an activity, you should just be able to go do the activity. And, you know, just say for whatever reason this helps.
I think that's why a lot of the younger veterans go for some of the organizations like Veterans on the 48 or Team
Okay.
Red, White, and Blue that are actually out physically doing stuff. And you get the same result. You get the camaraderie, and you're out
Yeah.
with other veterans, and you're doing fun stuff. And
Yeah, and it provides those connections so that if you do want to pick up the phone to somebody
you have somebody to talk to.
who you feel like had a similar experience or just you click with, right? I mean,
Yep.
you don't need to explain it to anybody. It's just somebody you think you could talk to. How are things in the VSO world in terms of caseload and number of people?
Currently, my office has 2,000 plus
Wow.
not
2,000 plus active cases.
DAB, what I understand, has over 4,000.
Okay.
So the numbers are still coming in.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of managing time, trying to take care of everybody's needs, and at the same time provide service at a time again.
Yeah.
So, a lot of that is still,
Yeah.
no clue.
Right.
As time goes on, though, more and more people reform.
Yeah.
As a result, we're getting more money.
Oh, yeah. So, increasing number of case managers would be a good thing.
The state only has so many, correct?
Yeah.
Last year we did over 14,000 connection between actual fields and everything.
Yeah.
Just got the report from Jesse, 14,000.
Yeah. So let's look at the way staffing is allotted and
Yeah.
see if we can make a case. Because I mean that's a huge caseload.
What do we have now? The first area that
Total membership.
Both for the VFW,
you can look at is
roughly 5,500, I think.
I was going to say 58, we're actually the comments you can make during your speeches and everything else. Like the women's clinic is going to come up to be a
Yeah.
a lot of
100,000 veterans in the state.
Yeah.
And I think
They're not joining us, they're joining others.
the young generation,
Yeah.
and I think all the organizations did a study on the single American veterans.
Yeah.
And 82% of
Wow. Okay.
we're not reaching, I don't think any organization is reaching the younger generation, except me. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think you get the point. I mean, somehow we gotta reach these people. We can't give you that information, we can't do this, we can't do that. And I mean, Privacy Act, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think in some of your speeches, if we can reach out to the younger veterans who are here.
Yeah.
We can help.
Well, and I think maybe different platforms too.
Yeah.
So one of the things we know from the last election cycle is just the number of different social media and other platforms that exist out there, and some of us are better than others at actually being on those platforms, and that's something that, you know, I use modern technology fairly well, but I still like watching the nightly news, right? So I am not, I don't always think about the other platforms. My team obviously does, but it's something we've got to generate more kind of content for, so that especially young women coming out of the military would know that there are other female veterans in New Hampshire. There are other female veterans all around the state, some in very rural areas, and just trying to make sure that they have a sense of that opportunity and connection.
I was the only female veteran at the Woodbury Veterans Breakfast, apparently.
Wow.
The only one. And all the children that were passing out the gifts kept looking at me and going, no, not that one. Because they didn't think that I was a veteran. And so I went home and I went on, there's a Facebook group that's really blown up in the state, women, like New Hampshire, women making friends or something like that. And I went ahead and joined that a while back, and I said, hey guys, I was the only female veteran at that thing. Where are my fellow veterans? And I mean, there were probably 150 that went like me, So next year there will be a bunch of us in the audience.
And let's make sure Cindy Woodbury knows about that, because
well, she does.
She does.
In the chamber, so
okay, all right, you told her.
Yeah,
okay.
So she's asked me if I'll speak, like not this year, but next year.
And it's really interesting how this can proliferate.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not unusual for women electeds to arrive places and people look over our shoulders for, I got this as governor all the time, where's the governor? And I'd be like, call me crazy, but I'm here. It's not a personal thing, it's again, it's mindset, right? Like, it's, and so,
An archaic
but it's also just what do you experience in life? If you've never, if you've never met a female or never seen one in a particular position, your mind snaps into what you grew up with. I mean, it is what it is, and I never took it personally, but it's just kind of like, that's interesting. So to that point, we need to reach out, and maybe what we need to do too is make sure that we're giving women veterans an opportunity as they're comfortable talking about their service. And also for recruiting purposes, it's really important.
Yes.
But I can tell you,
Yeah.
my wife will be the state president for the American Legion Auxiliary in 2 years. They've been looking for a women's veteran organization that is active and remains in New Hampshire. She doesn't want to give her money to a project that is going to support all 50 states.
Right.
Yeah.
The money's coming
so just
from
like a New Hampshire
places in
women's
New
veteran.
But to try to find something in New Hampshire itself that stays local, very, very difficult.
Well, have you been to the Women's Veterans Conference at the Cathedral of Pines?
Stuff to do.
I saw it like that was like last summer or fall.
I think September, August, September. But I'll tell you what, I went because we have lots of women veterans in the VFW, and I went to that, and it was phenomenal. So I recommend maybe. I think we need to get the word out about they need to get the word out better, because I think there may have been 100, and that was probably the largest group that they had. But think about how many, and it's only a one-day program, but it is absolutely phenomenal. So I would recommend and even push that out on other women's platforms.
We just need to unite. Like I was thinking about it, and I always wonder why. No offense, but you guys wear your hats and everything, and I was like, well, you know what? Nobody would know that you served in the military. You'd just be another dude walking down the street if you weren't wearing that. And so I walked in there. I was wearing my issued flight jacket, but aside from that, I don't have all the gear on that would indicate that that I'm getting, exactly. So it's not really a lot different.
But it's Camp Resilience had a retreat for women veterans that I went to for about an hour at some point.
Oh, it's Stephen Vino. He's amazing.
It was. I learned a lot. These were women veterans from all over the country. I felt like it was more New England, but they had some people from all over the country, and it was a reminder to me that some of the issues are still very unique to women, and things we need to continue to work on, and just the VA is still got some work to do in terms of recognizing certain kinds of trauma and recognizing certain treatments and experiences, to be sure. But that would be, let's do some more brainstorming about that too, because that would be an exciting thing to be able to
I'm
kind
gonna
of
fill a whole table at next year's breakfast.
yeah, and also just, but to Wayne's point too, having a New Hampshire women's veteran organization that wouldn't, that might be, you know, a collaboration among all the different
Right.
VSOs here, just doesn't matter which branch, doesn't matter which force, just
Yeah.
doesn't matter period of service.
Listen, I got a veteran younger than me to come to her first Legion meeting. I was the only one going. I was the only female until I got her to go with me. I said, just come and test it out. You don't have to say anything.
You don't
just
have
sit
to,
there
right.
and listen.
Yeah.
And just see what goes on. And
Yeah.
she went on, and then at the end I introduced her to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, that works, but you'll come to one meeting or two meetings, and the baloney is so great
Yeah.
that they just, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I don't want to listen.
Well, I think that like with a lot of the veteran organizations, though, I don't think that we're reaching the generation younger than me, the one generation younger than me, because I'm a Gen Xer, so I've seen just like the recruiting stuff come in paper, and now you see everything on social media. So I've been starting to learn how to use social media.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to school to figure it out, you know. But the point is like getting the message on what the organizations in general can provide to the veterans. I think is more important than just recruiting them.
Yeah. Or just a hangout factor. Yeah.
I think,
That it's more than just clubs and
I think we're going about a whole lot of this wrong. Is that we're going after the veteran first, and then trying to bring the family in. The younger veterans, I think, if you can bring the family in first,
Yes.
and have those activities for
Yes.
their children.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yes.
veteran today is coming out of work after working 8 or 10 hours. He's bringing his son to baseball over here, his daughter to soccer over there, the
Yeah.
wife's going to cheerleading, she's going, they don't have time to,
Yeah.
but if you have something on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning for those kids to do, you're gonna slowly bring those people in.
That's a really
I
good
think we
idea.
gotta work from the bottom up instead of the up down.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Is like
Yeah.
showing what we can do and how we can help them, and that it's
Then you'll
not
get
just
the
bands
growth.
and booze.
Right, and it's not,
Meetings.
and it's not just meetings or, you know, again, as as your kids get older, knock on wood, you have more time to do other things. But when your kids are,
The older I get, the less time I have.
yeah, I know. Yeah, but when you're in the middle of raising kids, or as my grandfather used to call it, when you're in the thick of it, it's just.
Yeah.
You're just getting up and going, and you don't have time for.
Survival.
Yeah.
It's just survival.
They're always fight or flight.
Yeah. So.
That was a military thing too. You recruit the individual, but you retain it through the family.
Yeah. My team is standing up, which is their usual signal to tell me that I'm supposed to
That
catch
you're
a
running out of
plane.
time.
Like, I got a plane. But one, thank you again for your time, because you're all really busy people, and I really appreciate it. You know, Justin and Joe in my office in DC is another veteran who, also, he works the policy side intensely. Justin does both things here. And actually, we just got back from the Battle of the Bulge commemoration, which was really
Nice.
That was a pretty cool. That was a guy named John Foy, 99 years old, got up and spoke, and you could have heard a pin drop in the Luxembourg one, and he didn't miss a beat, and he reminded people, war may be necessary sometimes, but it has a huge cost, and he did it beautifully. But it was a good trip. But look, again, thank you. Keep in touch. We have our to-do list on TRICARE. Women's Health Clinic is going to come online, but I hear you loudly and clearly, and if there's a theme here, just finding more and more platforms to to let people know their options, whether it's women finding other women veterans, whether it's families and caregivers. We just got to keep the conversation going, and I appreciate all of you very much. So stay in touch. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time.